Hello there, Ramblers, and welcome back to another thrilling instalment of Reese Rambles, my weekly podcast all about the latest comings and goings, movings and shakings, and indeed all the rest of it in the worlds of vintage and retro computing, gaming, and technology. Hope you're all doing well out there. And I was a couple of minutes late sitting down to record this. I know I say this pretty much every week. I have all these grand intentions of coming in here first thing in the morning and recording everything by lunchtime, getting it all edited and ready to upload. And inevitably, stuff goes wrong. I've had some car trouble and stuff as well that I've had to sort out today. But yeah, I got everything ready. I sat down to start recording, and my microphone needed a firmware update. Yeah, that's right. My Rode NT USB Plus that I use here for all of these podcasts, and I have been using this for years and years now, actually. I used to use it for my main channel videos as well, after I upgraded from the original Rode NT USB. It's a USB-C mic plugged straight into the computer, and it's a very low hassle. Of course, not one of these pro podcasters that has the Shure SM7B and the proper audio interface with the XLR connectors and stuff like that. I went down the USB route, and apparently this morning I had to update the firmware on it. No idea what's changed. This could sound absolutely awful. I guess we'll find out. We'll find out when I come to edit it. And on that note, I have also been making some changes to my audio workflow. It's something I've been wanting to look at for the longest time. I've had this suspicion for quite a while now that when I made some changes a while back, some things were kind of slightly improved, but I think on the whole, I'm actually kind of making things sound a little bit worse than they should. And it's something I've been wanting to look at. And this week I finally decided to sit down and actually spend some time on it. So that applies to my main channel video, the Doom on a cake machine video that will be going out today. Will be out by the time you are watching this or listening to this. And also to these as well, to my podcast, of course, with a different type of mic and stuff. It is a whole different workflow, but based around the same principles, and hopefully it is an improvement. So it'll be interesting to hear your feedback on that. And just before we do jump into my first story for this week, I thought we'd take a quick look at some of the stuff that I have on my desk here, because it's quite a good indication of some things that I have coming up in the very near future. So the first one, I've just bought another one of these. I'm just checking this out on the monitor, by the way, not staring off into space. This is the 8-bit DOE Ultimate Wireless Controller, hashtag not sponsored. And I've been using the black version of this for the past couple of years, and I love it. It's my favourite controller. I use it with my Mister. I use it with my gaming PC when I'm playing, couch, sit-down type games. And I've always been very pleased with it. I mean, this is starting to sound like an advert, but I thought I would pick up a second one. So I now have this purple one as well. I must admit the product listing, because I bought this on eBay, and the product listing did say white in the title, and I kind of absent-mindedly bought it. And then when I went back and noticed that the description and the actual photos were the purple version, did I realise that I actually bought the purple version. But I'm very pleased that I did, actually, because I really like the look of this, and it has kind of GameCube vibes to it, I think. It is that shade of purple. And, of course, unlike white, purple does quite a good job of hiding the dirt. So, actually, you know what? I'm happy with that. And you will find out why I need a second controller, hopefully in the near future, because I do have a gaming project coming up. I have a sponsor that has contacted me about a piece of hardware that they want to send to me, and I have grand plans for it. So I look forward to that. That's going to be arriving in the next couple of weeks, and then probably a couple of weeks to put the video together. But the other thing that I have here, and I have kind of alluded to this in the past few weeks, but I have now got to a point where I am committing to this, and for reasons you will find out in a second. This is the PicoIDE. Now, this is the prototype version that was sent to me very kindly by Polpo, by Ian Scott. So I guess this one is hashtag sponsored. And he sent this to me for review. It's an optical drive emulator for PCs, or indeed anything that supports an IDE optical drive, or indeed any other IDE device. It will do hard drives and things as well. But my specific focus is on its optical drive support, because that is something that has been severely lacking, I think, in the PC world. A decent SD card image-based optical drive emulator that supports stuff like Redbook audio and CD audio tracks and that kind of stuff. And it is a very ambitious project. And knowing Ian and having seen what I've seen so far, he is very much pulling this off and very much delivering on all the stuff that it promises. So, yeah, I am working on a review of this. You will see some reviews starting to drop on some other channels as well. Some really nice people in there, some really big names who you will have heard of in our particular niche. We are all in a big group chat together, I will say. and I'm very keen indeed to give my thoughts on this. I was kind of waiting for Ian to settle down with the firmware because the guy's releasing new features and stuff like mad for this. By the time I'd actually sat down and recorded something and started to edit it, he would have released 3 or 4 other massive and quite important features. But I'm going to have to commit, and the reason for that, finally getting to the point, what are we? Oh wow, we're 5 minutes in. Is this? This is the crowdfunding campaign for the PicoIDE. Now, this launched yesterday, so this is very much news. And it is an open source IDE/ATAPI drive emulator for vintage computers. And it had a $35,000 goal, this crowdsourcing campaign, and it has raised $64,533 as at the time of recording. Like I say, 24 hours, it's 184% funded, 442 backers, and it still has over a month left to go. So this is very much a go. There was not a shred of doubt in my mind with of course, with Ian being behind this. Of course, the big name behind the PicoGus, which has been such a fantastic thing for the community. I have it up on the shelf over there. I was going to get it ready to show to you for this, and I completely forgot. So I'm sure you're familiar with the PicoGus. It's an ISA card that emulates all sorts of different sound cards and things from the past. And yeah, brilliant product. And he is a brilliant member of the community. This is all open source as well, open source hardware and software. So you can build your own or you can buy one. And you know, the quality of this 3D printed case is excellent, but the finished version is going to have an injection molded case. So yeah, and there has been talk of 5 1/4-inch versions and stuff as well. So yeah, I'm very much behind this project. I think it's great. So yeah, that's the Crowd Supply PicoIDE crowdsourcing, crowdfunding campaign. And the reason I mention that is partly because I'm really excited about this as a thing. I've been wanting something like this for years now. Also because Ian is a bloody lovely chap and he's done an awful lot of good stuff for the community. And of course he did send this to me for free and I do get to keep it. So I do need to be very clear about disclosing that, but that's not the reason I am shouting from the rooftops about this, and hopefully you understand that. But yeah, it's open source IDE ATAPI drive emulator that replaces aging hard drives and CD-ROM drives in vintage computers with solid state micro SD card storage. So you put your disk images on a micro SD card and you can swap between them as needed. Open source hardware and software. And of course, these old optical drives, they're all dying out. These early CD-ROM drives, even some of the kind of DVD drives and things, they're belt driven. And of course, the belts perish over time. The laser modules fail. Probably one of the less reliable parts of these vintage computers that we all know and love, and yet such an important part of the experience. You know, some of the methods for emulating optical drives in software just aren't quite 100% perfect, especially stuff like CD audio. Your soundtracks for stuff like Quake and games like that, of course, actual audio tracks on the CDs, and this kind of strives to address all of those issues. So yeah, anyway, that's all stuff that's been covered. I've just basically reworded what it says here. You can go and read this. I will link to this down below in the description. It's on crowdsupply.com/polpotronics/PicoIDE. And yeah, there's a big sales pitch on here just explaining anything and everything about this thing. But if you're in the market for this, you will already know what it is and you will already be very excited about it. And the fact that it's still in beta and it hasn't even had the public release yet, and yet is so full-featured and so reliable and so complete, even at this early stage, just kind of speaks volumes about his commitment to the project and his approach to this stuff. I promise this isn't a paid ad, but yeah, please do go and check that out. It has met its target, which is great because I did really want this to succeed, but of course it is all open source anyway. But this is going to be such a game changer, particularly for people like me. Obviously, I have my YouTube channel here. I do a lot of stuff with old, software and stuff, and just installing operating systems on things and getting games up and running. It's going to be so much easier with this that I can just slot in and run all of the stuff directly from disk images. And later on, it will be able to support hard drive and optical drives together as a master and slave device on the same cable, all emulated from the same device. So not only can you boot your operating system from this and indeed have a menu that allows you to select from all of those different disk images, but you can also run your optical stuff on there, CDs and DVDs. DVDs? I don't know if it mentions DVDs. Certainly CDs. Anyway, that's my first story for this week's Ramble. That is the PicoIDE officially launching on Crowd Supply as a crowd-funded thing. Please do go and back it. And of course, you can pick yours up from $69, which for everything that it offers, and of course the quality with the injection molded case and stuff, I think is an excellent, excellent deal. And yeah, that's that. The PicoIDE. What a start to this week's Ramble. If you're a regular here, it probably won't have escaped your attention that I am a huge fan of the Atari ST. And that is a love affair that started way back in 1991 when I got my Atari STE as a kid. In fact, I have it right here as part of my studio backdrop. This is my actual childhood Atari STE here in all its glory. And just a bit of history on the ST, I guess. Of course, it was released in 1985 by Jack Tramiel, who, of course, was the owner of Atari at the time. He was an ex-Commodore guy, knew the Amiga was coming, wanted to be kind of first out of the door with his 16-bit machine, and released the ST. And then, of course, the Amiga came afterwards, initially the 1000, and then later the 500. The 500, of course, having kind of advanced graphics and sound capabilities. And then in 1989, I believe, Atari decided to play catch-up with Commodore and released the STE, which was kind of on par with the Amiga 500, with the DSP-based sound and the hardware scrolling and all of that stuff. But, of course, it was too little too late. And yeah, history tells us that the Amiga won that particular battle, but by the end of the 90s, the war was well and truly lost by both platforms, as the PC made them both entirely irrelevant. But 40 years later, there are still people who will argue until they're blue in the face as to which was the better platform on the internet. And we're all old enough to know better, so let's celebrate everything for its particular strengths and weaknesses, and appreciate it for what it was. And that's what I'm going to do now. Now, I want to talk a little bit about mini consoles because, of course, back in the early 2000s, just going back to Atari, they released the Flashback console, which, as far as I know, as far as I've seen based on my research, was actually the first of the TV-based mini consoles. Of course, the initial versions were based on the 2600 and the 7800, connected to a TV via composite connection. And it's I have been collecting them, and it is something that I do want to make a video about on the channel at some point. I know I keep talking about that, but yeah, that led to stuff like the NES Mini, of course, and the PlayStation Mini. And we've had some mini computers as well in recent years. So we've had mini versions of the C64 and the Amiga, the Atari 400, the Spectrum. And yeah, you know, it's quite nice to go back to these old software emulation-based machines, load them up with all your old games and stuff, and kind of revisit the glory days in a very convenient form factor. But of course, the ST is one that has always, you know, it hasn't had its time to have its kind of second innings as a mini PC. Well, that time, it appears, is finally upon us. There we go, I know I'll get there in the end. This is the Atari ST Mini, or the Mini ST, and unfortunately, it is not an official Atari product. Of course, Atari has recently done the 2600 Plus and the 7800 Plus, of which, as you'll probably know, I am a huge fan. I think they've done a fantastic job with those, but they haven't quite gotten around to the ST just yet. I have every faith that they will, because why not? Why not the ST? It's a wonderful machine. But thankfully, somebody in the community has stepped up and offered this. So this is over on tomshardware.com. Atari ST enthusiast announces the Mini ST with FPGA, Mystery Nano core, and a black TKL case. This case looks lovely. Priced at around $400 each, but the initial run is a mere 5 units. Story here by Mark Tyson over on Tom's Hardware, of course, a famous brother of Mike Tyson. The Atari ST, writes Mark, is the Atari ST is a 16-bit home computer. I can't read. You should know by now. The Atari ST 16-bit home computer is getting some mini love at last, but the initial production run plans are decidedly micro, and there's some lovely photos of this case here. I actually initially, just a bit of a look behind the scenes, I went with a different site's coverage of this when I first sat down to record this, and they didn't have any photos of it, and the photos were on Facebook, and I'm not on Facebook. I do post my videos there, but other than that, I don't have a personal account there or anything, so this is why we've gone back to Tom's Hardware. I should have known better. But yeah, look at this thing. Doesn't this look wonderful? Anyway, an Atari computer enthusiast is planning to produce a compact computer dubbed the Mini ST. Yes, you've guessed it, the Atari ST 16-bit home computer is getting some mini love at last, albeit in a very limited initial batch of 5 units at approximately €350, which is $400. Information shared by Dennis Shaw in the Atari ST and ST users Facebook group indicates that this cute black TKL encased computer will be powered by a Tang Nano FPGA running the Mystery Nano core. Shaw makes it clear in his post that all the materials are open source and can be freely obtained. Hooray, another open source hardware project. Hopefully that's going to be a bit of a theme for this week's Ramble. I love open source hardware and indeed open source software. So the makers out there, continues Mark, with modernised Atari ST yearnings and the ability can make something similar with the open source components linked below. For example, the 3D printer files for the Creative Commons case design chosen by Shaw are available under the moniker Atapi STX. That particular case is designed for Raspberry Pi use, but Shaw has modified and shared the mods for this FPGA-powered ST computing solution. Under the hood, or inside the wedge, you will find a motherboard featuring the Tang Nano FPGA running the Mystery Nano core, which has been ported from Mister. And like the FPGA Amigas, C64s, and other retro remakes, the FPGA raises the vintage computing experience above and beyond the use of an emulator. Because this offers, just deviating from the story here, it offers a cycle-exact 8 MHz 68,000 CPU, and it has the complete chipset there, recreated in FPGA. It has multiple Atari TOS-ROM versions available, of course being the operating system on the ST, colour and monochrome video modes, and YM2149, of course the famous Atari ST sound chip, and STE DMA sound via HDMI. It's got a Blitter chip, it's got ASCA hard disk support, and it has physical MIDI port. So, of course, last week I was talking about Fatboy Slim and his appearance on the Retro Hour as a guest. And, of course, he is a famous Atari ST user. He's used it on all of his big dance hits over the years, even up until very, very recently. And, yeah, he talked a bit in that interview about picking up original vintage Atari ST machines and that original hardware and how you used to be able to get them for next to nothing. Well, now, Norman, you don't need to rely on that vintage hardware anymore. You can have a brand new hardware-based solution, cycle exact, with physical MIDI ports on it. You couldn't say fairer than that, could you? So it does use an RP2040 microcontroller as a companion chip alongside that FPGA, but it uses that for USB support and an on-screen display. So it isn't actually doing any of the software emulation on that chip. It is all very much FPGA based. Anyway, back to the text of the story. After that minor deviation, moving on to the scale of this production run, Shaw makes it clear that producing a Mini ST is rather time-consuming, as it takes an awful lot of time to print, sand and paint them. Thus, only 5 fully assembled, ready to plug in go. Mini ST machines are planned to be sold as an initial batch. Perhaps the maker should invest in one of our best 3D printer choices to boost production. That's some good cross-linking there, Mark. Good cross-promotion. Caught me out with that one. The project seems wildly popular on the Atari ST and STE users Facebook group. So we hope Shaw or another enterprising individual or group can look at doing a Commodore 64 Ultimate style job with the ST. Of course, that is the new full-blown modernised version of the Commodore 64 from Perifractic's newly revived Commodore. People are starting to get their hands on those, and the initial feedback from those is very, very good, I will say. So that's excellent. And yeah, Commodore computers seem to have got a lot more love with mini and full-size remakes, and we think it is about time for the ST to be represented in the mid-2020s with its own modernised, reimagined retro computer. Oh yeah, I totally agree with that, Mark. That's a very good point. But yes, when is Atari going to recognise the ST and release an official mini version? Perhaps never. Or perhaps they'll work with retro games to put out a software emulation-based version. Or perhaps they are focusing on the Jaguar. That's what I'm hoping, that we're going to get a Jaguar Mini at some point, because that is a console that does need to be preserved and enjoyed quite more widely. Anyway, that's Tom's hardware. With the Mini ST, only 5 in the initial production run, but if you have the means to make one yourself, all of the files are out there. It is fully open source hardware and software. You just need the FPGA, a 3D printer, and some other bits and bobs, and you can put together your very own Mini ST. So just taking a moment to step away from the open source hardware world to talk about one of my other favourite topics, and that is remakes and remasters of old games, classic games that either passed us by back in the day or indeed games that we enjoyed and played to death but unfortunately struggled to play on our modern systems. And this one comes courtesy of Dr. Evil, who has swung by my Discord server this week to let me know about a project that he is involved with. And I took a look at this and I was very impressed indeed. So I thought I would help to give it a little shout out and a little bit of a leg up, a bit of publicity, because I do want to see this succeed. This is a game that I was aware of, but not one that I've played. And actually, having done some reading into this, having since discovered this, it looks absolutely brilliant. I have no idea how this managed to pass me by, but hey, you know, that's why we have these remasters and these remakes. So without further ado, this is the Midwinter Remaster. Now, I didn't know anything at all about Midwinter, but apparently it is abandonware officially, so you can go and download it from myabandonware.com, and I will link to that if you want to check out the original version. It was apparently released on the PC, the Amiga, and the Atari ST back in 1990, and it's kind of a survival exploration spy type game from what I've managed to work out from the videos and the descriptions and things that I've been reading. But this is a really, really comprehensive game. I'm sure I remember seeing screenshots and things of this back in the day, and I certainly remember seeing gameplay of it at some point over the years. But yeah, this is going to be a great opportunity for me to check this out again. Now, this is in the very early stages. It is in pre-alpha, so they have a 0.6.0 pre-alpha release, and they are currently in the process of recruiting developers, artists, and other people to work on this game. They do have a Discord server as well, which you can get to from the website if you do want to help them out and join the team, or indeed if you want to sign up as a tester and to help them to test this. So this game is written in Rust, apparently, Dr. Evil informs me, and it is a ground up rewrite of Mike Singleton's 1989 classic Midwinter. And that is with blessing from someone called Chili Hugger, who apparently holds the rights from Mike Singleton to actually remake this game. So that's cool. Built in Rust using the Bevy engine, the goal is a faithful recreation, same mechanics, same 32 recruits, same desperate guerrilla war against general masters across that frozen 160,000 square mile island. And there's a lot of kind of free roaming exploration and stuff in this. You can travel around on skis or on a snowmobile. There's also cable cars that kind of link to certain areas of this map based on the stuff that I've seen. But look at this. I'm just going to hit play on the YouTube video and we're just going to check this out together. This is 11 minutes, so I'm not going to play the entire thing. But as you can see, we have the menu screen here looking very competent indeed. Of course, this is pre-alpha, I will say. So it is still a little bit rough around the edges, but it's amazing how far, how far they've managed to get with what they have so far. I just want to show some gameplay of this. So we've got the view through the goggles as per the classic game. Of course, this is a much higher frame rate, much smoother, much higher resolution polygons than that original. And there is a bit of a tutorial level here as well. So here is Dr. Evil in the corner explaining all of this, if you do want to go and check out this video. And yeah, it's essentially a tutorial on how to play the alpha and a bit of an introduction to all of the stuff that you can do. But look at this. This is a real labour of love, this is. So that is the Midwinter Remake. It is a fan remake, although it does have an official blessing behind it. I don't know what else to say about this. I'm sat here singing its praises because it does look absolutely bloody brilliant, and I really need to find time to actually sit down and check this out. But there is a website as well, which, as per the game, is very comprehensive and very well put together, and has, an awful lot of content and information about the game. And indeed, also a link to join the Discord if you want to get involved with testing or developing the Midwinter Remaster. A game that completely passed me by, and I know people are going to criticise me for this. I know there's people out there who are going to say, Reese, how can you not have played Midwinter? It's such a classic. And I guess the answer to that is there are an awful lot of classics out there, and back in the early 90s, it was quite hard to get your hands on this stuff if, as a kid. Certainly didn't have the money to buy it from a shop, and if I didn't have a friend who had a copy of it who was willing to make a slightly less than legit copy of it for me to play, then I just didn't come across it at the time. But I'm certainly glad that we have these opportunities nowadays, and that's why I do like to push these modern-day fan remakes and remasters. Real labour of love from Dr. Evil and a hopefully growing team of passionate Midwinter fans, developers, artists and the like. Please do go and check it out. Please do go and give it your support, particularly if you are a fan of the original game. And also, if you want to go and revisit the original, because it's been some time, apparently it's abandonware, and you can download it from myabandonware.com. Great news this week for Midwinter fans. So let's take a very brief diversion from the worlds of hardware, software and gaming to talk about music production. Modern day music production using modern day hardware, but with very much a retro angle to it. And I'm not talking about people like Fatboy Slim making music on his Atari ST. No, this has come to me from Naoki, who has a fantastic YouTube channel called Naoki's Retro Corner. Please do go and check it out. And we have worked together in the past on some stuff as well, some Atari stuff, some hardware repairs, that kind of thing. But Naoki, in addition to being a very talented YouTuber, is also a very talented musician, which is more than I can say for myself. I know I play the guitar, I played the bass in a band for years, I do dabble in piano and ukulele, mandolin and all of that stuff as well. But modern day music production on computers is not something that I've ever really gotten into. And it's a world that really fascinates me, I will say. But I guess something that I think takes quite a bit of work to get into. There's so many different options and things out there. And I have 1,000,001 hobbies already. So I'm quite happy to live vicariously through other people who are far better at this than I am. And, poke my nose in and see what they're up to. So Naoki has let me know about this week because there has been an update to this, but I was completely unaware of this product and I love it. And if you're into, electronic music production or looking to get into it, I think you should know about this because it looks very cool. So this is from Impact Soundworks, who I am not familiar with at all, not being part of that world. And it's a product called Super Audio Cart 2. Now, the reason this is newsworthy is because there has been an update to this recently, which I will talk about in a second. But I thought I'd just do a bit of an introduction to this because, of course, this isn't my usual target audience. So this is the definitive collection of retro video game samples. And this spans over 30 years of gaming history. And you can see here from the screenshot, the kind of consoles that are covered by this collection. So we've got the N64, the Super Nintendo, the PlayStation, and the Game Boy Advance here. Although there is an awful lot more to this, and it does go into a bit of detail as to how all of this was made and put together, and it's very, very impressive stuff. A real labour of love. So $199. And you can plug it into your modern digital audio workstation and use all of those wonderful, authentic retro sounds. So, exhaustively sampled from 19 distinctive consoles, handhelds and sound chips. The first library ever to delve into platforms like the N64, the Sample Cell 2 and the PlayStation. And it has over 6,000 authentic sound sources, from simple waves to timeless acoustic PCM samples. Customize, tweak and transform sounds with a massively powerful synth engine, and it runs in the free Contact player. So you have VST, AU and AAX plugins available for Super Audio Cart 2. It's the ultimate compendium. Can't say that word. The ultimate compendium of video game musical history. So from the Atari 2600 in 1977 to the Game Boy Advance in 2001, Super Audio Cart 2 encompasses multiple generations of legendary audio hardware, even obscure chips such as the VRC-6, which was apparently a Japan-only add-on for the Famicom, the Sample Cell 2, which is a hardware-based sound card, and the MSX home computer. But far beyond mere pulse waves, bleeps and bloops, although it has plenty of those too, the Super Audio Cart 2 includes virtually any instrument you can imagine, taken straight from the worlds of your favourite games and systems. It's 100% authentic and royalty-free, and I think this is quite important because what they've done here You know what? I'll read their words and then I'll try to sum it up for you. Many of the included systems use PCM sample playback rather than pure synthesis. We did not rip samples from existing games. We spent years painstakingly recreating thousands of classic sounds from scratch using our own sample catalogue and careful editing. Where applicable, these sounds were then played back directly from the original hardware for maximum authenticity. In other words, the sounds in Super Audio Kart 2 are as close as possible to the sounds you remember from your favourite retro games without any need to worry about copyright infringement or royalties. So, they've recreated all of the sounds themselves from scratch, run them through original hardware where they can for maximum authenticity, and that means that it's all royalty-free and there's no copyright to be concerned with. Now, there's an awful lot more to this, as you can imagine. But this has been created by people in the industry as well. That this is something that they point out here. People who have worked on game music soundtracks and things in the past, so people with the proper credentials. But I did enjoy scrolling down to the list of systems that they have here. Now they do have sound samples for these, and you would think that this being a podcast and being an audio format, that I would play some for you. But I'm not really set up for that. And to be honest, there's an awful lot of them. And my workflow isn't really conducive to me going through and picking some of my favourites. So you will have to check out the link and go and check it out for yourself if you are interested in this. But we have the N64, we have the PlayStation, the Sample Cell 2, which apparently was a popular sound card from the early 90s. 32 voices across 8 channels. And apparently the factory library was notably used in the soundtracks of Super Mario 64 and The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And I hadn't come across the Sample Cell 2 at all. So there you go, that's one for you. Game Boy Advance, the NES, the Genesis/Mega Drive, the Commodore 64. So 3 independent oscillators, 4 waveforms, volume envelopes, ring modulation, oscillator sync, and multi-mode filter. So if you want to make authentic sounding SID music without the use of the original Commodore 64 hardware, you can use this. We've got the SNES, the Super Nintendo, the Game Boy, the Adlib card, groundbreaking 80s and 90s sound card from the early digital music scene, uses FM synthesis to produce multi-timbral instruments and sound effects via the Yamaha YM3812 sound chip. We've got the Amiga 500, we've got the Master System, we've got the Aegis Sonics, which I hadn't even heard of, the Atari ST, of course, and the Pokey chip. As used in, of course, a lot of Atari's 8-bit machines and arcade games and stuff. Ultimate Sound Tracker, we've got WinGroove, we've got the MSX, the Famicom, including the VRC6, VRC7 and the disk system, and a whole load more as well. This is starting to sound like an advert again, isn't it? But I have only just discovered this, and I think it's a very cool thing indeed. I know that Naoki uses it as well. So there has been an update to this. If you're an existing user of this, I suppose I should point out that there is the 1.0.1 update available for this now. But to be honest, it's just an excuse to talk about something that I've just stumbled across, thought was very cool. Thank you ever so much to Naoki for letting me know about this, and if only I had the skills to play with this. I would like to sit here and say, you know what, I'm actually going to make this, I'm going to make 2026 the year that I finally sit down and learn how to use all of this stuff. But I think both you and I know full well that I'm just not going to have time for that. It's time. Time to recognise and honour one of gaming's greatest achievements over the years, and indeed, perhaps one of humanity's greatest achievements as a whole. And actually, I don't think I'm even being facetious when I say that. I think I do actually genuinely believe that. I am, of course, talking about id Software's 1993 first-person shooter, Doom. Shout out to the Doom Shrine, my collection of Doom releases and various paraphernalia. Got my original shareware copy from back when I was a kid, the one that we got with my very first PC in 1994. We got the mail order boxed copy that you had to write off and send a check to id Software in Texas all those years ago. Very, very rare part of the collection that. We got various statuettes and figurines and stuffed toys and, of course, all of the releases from original Doom, Doom 2, Doom 3. We got the modern Dooms in there as well. But the less said about the Dark Ages, the better, I think. Now, of course, if you know anything at all about Doom, you will know that there is a fine and long-standing tradition of people running Doom on all sorts of weird and wonderful devices. And we tend to have one every single week here on Reese Rambles. That's just how prolific this movement is. And I have made my own contribution this week, which I'm going to talk about, but that isn't the subject of this next story. I'm going to talk about this in a lot more detail at the end of this week's Ramble. But yeah, my video this week, as it happens, and I have mentioned this a couple of times, I think, is Running Doom on an industrial cake machine. So there's a building next door, which used to be a cake factory. My studio landlord has purchased it. He's turning it into a warehouse, and at the moment the building is being demolished. But we found that some of the machines and things were still in there and had working PCs attached to them. So, of course, I decided to run Doom on one. And that was the subject of my latest video. I played Doom on an abandoned industrial cake machine, but I'll talk a bit about that at the end of this week's Ramble. I just wanted to put it out there because it is relevant to this story. Anyway, this is over on PCGamer.com, a story by Justin Wagner. Or is that Wagner? We'll go with Wagner because that sounds quite classy, doesn't it? And the headline here is Doom has been ported to a pair of earbuds, and you can play remotely on the programmer's own pair in your browser. And I love the subheading here, play Doom with your buds. I really hope Justin got a pay rise for that, because that's fantastic. Anyway, I know what you're thinking. How banal. Yet another programmer has got Doom running where it doesn't belong. And I get it. You've seen id Software's formative FPS running on a Lego brick, a PDF, bacteria, 100 pounds of potatoes, a pregnancy test, and even a piano. I'm just saying, Justin, if you want to add Cake Machine to that list in future and link to my video, I certainly won't complain. Anyway, I don't think I could make up something more ridiculous than what's already been done. And yet, I am still impressed by Doom Buds. Thanks to Sydney-based web developer Arin Sarkisian, Doom now runs on a pair of earbuds. More specifically, it runs on the Pine Buds Pro, which Sarkisian explains on his site are the only earbuds with open source firmware. The buds have a CPU strong enough to run Doom with some minor tweaks. The site notes Sarkisian cranked the CPU up to 300 MHz and disabled low power mode, providing more than enough juice to run the game, albeit at around 18 FPS. Imagine, when I was a kid playing Doom on our 486 PC back in, Christmas 1994. Imagine telling that kid, I would have been 10 years old at the time, one day you'll be able to play this game on something that fits inside your ear hole. I don't think I would have believed it. It's incredible, really, isn't it? Doom itself, the story continues, also required some tweaking so that the Bud's meager RAM could handle the game. But the site explains there are plenty of optimizations that can cut down on Doom's required 4 megabytes of RAM. And while the earbuds can only hold 4 megabytes of data, Doom is just a bit larger than that, the 1.7 megabyte Squashware WAD is small enough to fit. The power of id Tech 1 in the palm of my ear. Of course, the WAD being where's all the data, being the package that contains the level data and music and stuff for Doom. So if you're itching to try this version of the game, the story continues, you can play it without any Pine Buds of your own. The Doom Buds website has an embedded Twitch stream and a virtual queue where anyone can line up to connect to Sarkisian's earbuds remotely and play Doom on them from their browser. Because earbuds don't have a screen, this stream acts as the game's display. How that exactly works is laid out on the More Info section of the website, but suffice it to say, it's a pretty novel way to experience Doom, even with the low frame rate. If you'd like to run Doom on your own Pine Buds, Sarkisian has shared the means to do so on GitHub. So yes, there is a GitHub page if you want to play Doom on your own earbuds. I guess we'll click through and take a look at that, see how much information we have on there. Yeah, there you go. There's an embedded video of it running. But of course, I think the main thing of interest is the website. Now, I did just check this out, and unfortunately, the Twitch stream isn't currently running. I don't know if it's overloaded due to the sheer amount of interest, or of course, the story did mention that the creator of this is based in Australia, and I think it's the middle of the night there, as at the time of recording. So perhaps that explains why it's not up and running. But either way, Doom Buds, the internet-connected earbuds from hell, and I love the design of this site. It's very Doom. So, yeah, what exactly is this? You know the 1993 classic Doom? I made it run on an earbud. Then I connected it to the internet and made it possible for visitors like you to sit in a queue for hours, play the game remotely. Yeah, it won't just run on any old earbud. It only works on the Pine Buds Pro. Oh, here we go. Last time I came here, there was a Twitch stream. What happened? The Twitch stream was a classic case of premature optimization. It was intended to dramatically reduce outgoing bandwidth. However, it turned out to be completely unnecessary as I later migrated the server to a VPS host with much higher egress limits. Well, either way, the stream isn't working. But there is more info on here. So, We have a Doom port that runs directly on the earbuds, on the integrated CPU within the earbuds themselves. There's then a serial server that acts as a bridge between the earbuds and the web server, and that also transcodes the MJPEG stream to Twitch. So this is outputting video in MJPEG form, and that's being transcoded by a serial server. There's the web server, which serves the assets, manages the queue, forwards key presses, and displays the stream. There is a static web page that tells your browser what to display on the screen and communicates with the web server. And the firmware is pushing up against a few hardware limitations. So, of course, earbuds don't have displays. So the only way to transfer data is via Bluetooth or the UART contact pads. Bluetooth is pretty slow. You'd be lucky to get a consistent 1 megasecond connection. So UART is the better option. And indeed, this goes on to talk about the technical details of Doom's internal frame buffer, which is 8-bit at 320 by 200, which is 96 kilobytes. And we get 3 frames per second over UART, uncompressed. So he's also having to compress the video stream. H.264 consumes way too much CPU and RAM, and so that's why it uses MJPEG. And it goes on to talk about the open source MJPEG encoder and stuff that's being used for that. There's a 100 megahertz CPU, which has been overclocked to 300, and that's a Cortex M4F. And it maxes out at 18 FPS, purely because the MJPEG encoding, apparently. There's only 768K of RAM available, although disabling the coprocessor bumps that up to 992. And then it talks about pre-generating lookup tables, making variables constant, and a load of changes to the source code to optimize Doom to run in such a small amount of RAM. And it also talks about that smaller WAD file, which was mentioned in the PC Gamer story, to fit in the very small amount of flash that the earbuds have available. Kind of weird that they have 4 megabytes of flash memory on board, but only 768K of RAM, or 992K of RAM. This is wonderful. Of course, I think this is a very, very worthy addition to the pantheon of devices, ever-growing collection of devices that have had Doom ported to them over the years. You can play Doom on an earbud remotely when it's up and running on the website, which it doesn't appear to currently. And I don't really know what else to say about that, other than I'm glad I've had the opportunity to witness this. Imagine, what a time to be alive. Doom on an earbud. Some breaking news now that has just popped up as at the time of recording, and I absolutely need to cover this because I have a personal connection to this story. It's something I've been following for quite a long time now, over 5 years, and I have done my own little bit to kind of contribute to this and kind of play my part, and I'm so pleased to see this latest development. This is really, really excellent news for the world of game preservation and also for Atari fans as well. So this is a story about Curt Vendel. Now, if you're not aware, Curt Vendel was a really big name in the Atari world. He worked very closely with Atari. He was the guy behind the flashback consoles and some other bits of hardware and stuff, but he was best known in the world of Atari as a preservationist, as a collector. And he had probably the biggest collection of prototypes and documentation and material related to very kind of early Atari stuff when they were absolutely at their peak. And he saved all of it. He had a whole house full of this stuff. And the reason I'm speaking in the past tense is because very, very sadly, back in 2020, Curt passed away. And he was only 53 years old. I remember talking about this at the time. And his website, the Atari Museum, which was kind of the go-to place for all things Atari history, went offline shortly afterwards because nobody had access to any of his hosting setup. Stuff expired, people didn't have access to his servers and things, and quite sadly, it all just disappeared. And I was researching something a few years ago for a video and happened across this and discovered that there wasn't a mirror of the website available online in its kind of complete, unaltered historical form. So I created this, atarimuseum.control.reese.com. Now, this is kind of the unofficial mirror of his website. I went to the Wayback Machine. I used the Wayback Machine downloader, grabbed all of the files from that. I also found an older mirror on some kind of CD-ROM archive thing at some point and used that for some of the images and things that weren't in the Wayback Machine. kind of reverted all the HTML back to its original form so you can browse it all in, proper historical browsers and things. It was weeks and weeks worth of work, but I thought it was very important to put this back online and to make it available for people. And I did make a YouTube video about that at the time called The Atari Museum's Rarest and Coolest Exhibits, talking about some of the stuff that I'd found on this site. And I was actually contacted by Carl Morris, who was Curt Vendel's co-founder and partner in the Atari Historical Society, who had his own website called Atari Explorer, but the two of them over the years worked together really closely. Carl does some really excellent books on Atari history based on all of his work with Curt, and it all just kind of ties back into itself. So I'm not meaning to blow my own trumpet here, but I do just want to say that this is a thing, and please do go and check out this website because there's so much. This was this guy's entire life's work, and based on his collection of stuff that just doesn't exist anywhere else. Proper one-offs, unique pieces, prototypes, that kind of stuff. And that's the digital manifestation of that collection. But of course, after he passed away, the question came up as to what to do with that physical collection. His whole house full of stuff, full of very, very important stuff to the world of gaming history. And I was so pleased to see this pop up a few minutes ago. This is absolutely brilliant. So it has been acquired by the Strong Museum of Play in New York, a proper museum, and they are cataloguing it all properly, and they are going to be putting stuff on display and letting people experience this as well, which is bloody fantastic. This hasn't disappeared into private hands. They are kind of carrying on the legacy of what Curt was trying to do in making all of this stuff available for people to study. So the headline here on timeextension.com, Strong Museum of Play acquires comprehensive collection of Atari materials. The Curt Vendel collection now has a brand new home. Story by Jack Yarwood. And the story reads, the Strong Museum of Play in Rochester, New York has announced the acquisition of a comprehensive collection of Atari materials about Atari's home computer and console divisions from the early 1970s through the 2000s. The collection belonged to the late Curt Vendel, a historian, engineer and founder of the Atari Museum, who passed away unexpectedly back in 2020, aged 53. It's said to include hundreds of pieces of computer media on a variety of formats, along with original schematics and engineering drawings for released and unreleased consumer products. This includes materials related to the Atari 2600's television interface adapter chip, the redesigned Atari 2800, which of course was the Japanese version of the 2600, I made a video on that as well, and the unreleased Jaguar 2. And we have a post here from Andrew Borman at the Strong Museum of Play over on Blue Sky. The Strong is honoured to announce the acquisition of the Curt Vendel Atari collection. Curt was a pioneer in video game preservation. The collection contains retail material, schematics, documentation, prototypes, and more. And we have some images here of, we've got some magnetic tape here. Of course, Curt had a lot of the original reel-to-reel tape from Atari's servers. They did a lot of their development on PDP machines and stuff like that, and he actually had stuff like that in his collection that he was in the process of preserving. And also some VHS tapes here, some promotional stuff from Atari, which he was also digitizing and putting on YouTube, of course, before he quite sadly passed away. In addition to this, the story continues. The announcement also references other highlights, such as logbooks previously owned by Atari engineer Ron Milner, one of the creators of the 2600 prototype, and programmer Owen Rubin. In addition to various historical licensing documents with outside companies such as Sega, product design documentation, source code and ROM release folios for the Atari Jaguar and 2600 games, and merchandising and trade show materials. And Andrew continues on Blue Sky. The collection is massive, so it will take us even more time to identify, catalogue and organise it in a way that will be accessible to researchers and museum guests. I spent some time looking at some of the Jaguar prototypes from Tempest to Rayman and more, but there are so many more to find. And I would hit play on this embedded video, but it takes you across to Blue Sky. And I tried that on the previous take of this and it messed everything up. But it's just some clips of gameplay footage from those unreleased Jaguar prototypes, stuff like Rayman and some other games that Curt had in his collection. The variety of materials will support any number of different research possibilities. We're looking forward to sharing more as the collection continues to be processed. So we've got a complete set here of the Battle Zone box and packaging manuals and things for the Atari XE game system. We've got what looks like some hard driving documentation from 1992 and some, what's that, a Super Pong. That's like an original design document for the Super Pong box or the arcade machine. Anyway, prior to his passing, Vendel was particularly active in the Atari community. Not only was he responsible for founding the Atari Museum in 1997, but he also befriended many former Atari programmers, served as the designer of the first two Atari flashback plug-and-play consoles in the early 2000s, and co-authored an 800-page book called Atari Inc. Business is Fun, with fellow writer and programmer Marty Goldberg in 2012. And I will say, if you haven't read Atari Inc. Business is Fun, it is a great book. It's... What can I say about Atari? It's very obvious that... it was written as kind of a passion project and a labour of love. It's quite unpolished in places. It does kind of repeat itself in a few places. It does kind of meander and stuff. It is very, very much, in my kind of ballpark. And I loved it a lot. And I always recommend it to people. It's been quite a while since I've mentioned it. And very sadly, Curt was working on a follow-up called Business is War, which was going to be about Atari's home computer division, which sadly didn't get finished. But please do go and give Business is Fun a read. It is a great book if you are at all interested in not just Atari history, but also, the history of kind of the gaming industry and kind of how influential Atari was in the grand scheme of things in that industry. So well worth a read. But anyway... the Curt Vendel collection, as it has been called, will join other Atari-related archival collections at the Strong, supporting scholarly research into the early video game and home computing industries, product design and marketing, and fan-led preservation movements. Many of the materials will also be used in future exhibitions. What a wonderful, wonderful conclusion to this story. Great stuff. And so we find ourselves at my regular Video of the Week feature, wherein I feature a video, or indeed videos, that I have watched here on the old YouTubes in the past week that have entertained, enlightened, educated, informed, or otherwise improved my life in some small way. Sometimes they are retro and vintage computing, gaming and tech related. Sometimes they aren't. Sometimes there's one video and sometimes there's more than one video. And this week I have two videos for you. One of them is my video of the week, and the other one is a bit of an honourable mention. These are two things that came up on my radar this week, and they are very, very different indeed. But they are very much kind of gaming and vintage computing related, I guess. So that's a bit of a win, I suppose. Anyway, the first one that I want to talk about, and the reason I'm chuckling to myself is because I know just how stupid and unhinged this video is, but such an insane amount of work. This is Dank Pods. I don't know if you're familiar with Dank Pods, but it's a guy whose main bread and butter seems to be him filming top-down stuff with his iPhone, of him blowing up rubbish old headphones and buying like little portable media players and stuff from charity shops and kind of seeing what's on them and if they still work. I really love his presentation style. He's Australian, he's very excitable, and he does a load of other really cool stuff across YouTube as well that's well worth checking out. But he started doing these kind of bigger, kind of more produced videos, still in his particularly crazy style, in his game room. And I am really enjoying them. And this one, as I say, I mean, this is an hour and 5 minutes long, and it's called the 2026 Linux Summer Games. And I clicked on this not really knowing what it was going to be. But essentially what he's done here is he's comparing Windows to Bazzite. I know I talk about Bazzite all the time, and I have some more Bazzite content coming up on the channel as well in the near future. So I guess if you're not interested in that, you probably should have given up by now. But anyway, it turns out he's also a huge Bazzite fan, and he is basically comparing how various games run on a selection of different hardware. And this is quite a lot of different machines. What is it, like 12 different machines or something? Something like that. Covering a few different eras, bang up to date, really sort of high-end stuff. We've got a mixture of NVIDIA and AMD stuff in there. and just running the exact same games back to back on the two different operating systems, running benchmarks and seeing which runs better. And as you might expect, oh yes, he's got an Intel GPU in one of these as well, just to add to the madness. And of course, I don't want to ruin the video, but it's not a massive overall win for Linux. I will say, he's not a huge Linux fanboy, and he's quite happy to poke fun at it and laugh at it when it does screw up, which it does in quite spectacular fashion in quite a few places in this video. But there are indeed some big wins in here for Bazzite and examples of the game running better than it does under Windows, particularly on the AMD hardware, because of course the AMD far better supported under Linux. But very kind of honest, very upfront, very kind of methodical with the way that these benchmarks are run. And I thought it was a genuinely interesting video. And it was also a very entertaining video as well. Very stupid humour in this. Very kind of crazy, unhinged editing style. Very much not like my own stuff. But yeah, a subject that's dear to my heart, presented in a very entertaining way. And it's unusual for me to sit down and watch a full hour-long video on YouTube, I will say. But I put it on my TV the other day and had it on in the background and kept getting distracted and sitting down and actually watching it. I think this is done brilliantly. I think it's actually, I think the humour and the madness of it all actually kind of disguises the fact that it is very scientific and very thorough and actually incredibly well put together. So that is the 2026 Linux Summer Games. If you want to see a selection of different games running across a selection of hardware on Windows and also on Linux with a running leaderboard, kind of rounding up which system is better and how much, by percentage increase as far as FPS is concerned. And just seeing how, how well supported the various bits of hardware and stuff are. Look at this collection of hardware. Anyway, that's that. 2026 Linux Summer Games by DankPods, 1 hour and 5 minutes long, and a really great video. Now, I said that my honourable mention for this week was something completely different, and it indeed is. This was a music video by a band called Ghost. Now, I am familiar with Ghost, particularly with their metal covers of pop songs and things, and that is exactly what this is. This is a cover of It's a Sin, which of course was a Pet Shop Boys song, one I know very well. Am I a fan of Ghost? I'm not really a big listener of their stuff, but when it comes up on playlists and things, it's all right. I like my kind of rock music and stuff. I like a broad range of stuff. But this video caught my attention because of this kind of Windows 98-esque presentation of it. And it's quite oddly nostalgic, actually, to sit and watch. It's a good cover of a good song, which always helps. But the weirdly nostalgic, particularly like this video editor that they show here, which is Bone Splicer, which is obviously not a real piece of software. But, it reminded me of some of my very earliest days of cobbling together videos and things in Windows Movie Maker and that kind of thing. And I found it oddly comforting and oddly nostalgic. And I thought those of you out there who are into this particular genre of music and also your retro computing, thought you might enjoy it as much as I did. So there you go. We've got two very different things. A rather stupid but also surprisingly scientific comparison of Windows and Linux from DankPods, 1 hour and 5 minutes long, the 2026 Linux Summer Games, and also a music video from Ghost, their cover of It's a Sin by the Pet Shop Boys with their Windows 98 inspired video. They will be linked down below in the description, whether you are watching this on YouTube, on my second YouTube channel, youtube.com/ReesRambles, or indeed in the show notes if you're listening to this on your podcast platform of choice. It goes out on Spotify and a load of other podcast platforms every Friday night at 2 minutes to midnight. And they are my two featured videos of the week. Now, of course, speaking of videos, I tend to release stuff on my own channel on a Friday. And today, as at the time of recording, is indeed a Friday. And as mentioned earlier on in this ramble, I do have a video coming out which will be public by the time you are watching this. Now, the reason I'm releasing this a little bit later in the day is I really want this to do well. My last few videos have done 2,000-3,000 views, something like that, which is fine, actually. You know what? I don't obsess over view counts and things, but I think this is, running Doom on weird devices is something I talk about every single week. And this was a really, was like a once in a lifetime opportunity that happened to fall into my lap over the past couple of weeks. And I just want people to see it. I just want to share it with people. I think it was a really cool experience, and I think, sharing that experience with other people is kind of what this channel is all about, and probably something that I'm never going to get to do again. So this is me exploring an abandoned cake factory, which is next door to my studio building. As mentioned earlier, this building has been recently acquired by my studio landlord, and he is in the process. In fact, it's all pretty much gutted now. This was recorded a week or so ago, and it was in the process of being demolished at the time. So everything inside this building is being ripped out and scrapped or recycled or whatever, and he's just going to fill it with racking and fill it with stock for his mail order business. And I partnered up with his IT guy, Phil, who is a very good friend of mine, and we went inside this building. Oh, sponsor spot, skip it. We went into this building and were tasked with basically rescuing anything interesting or useful or remotely of value, which we did. And we also took the time to play Doom on one of the cake machines that was left over there as well. So yeah, this is I played Doom on an abandoned industrial cake machine. I'm releasing this a little bit later in the day than I usually would today, just because I want to catch the US audience for those early views. And if it is successful, it's probably something I'm going to continue with in future, releasing around sort of 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 24 minutes 16 long. I've tried to keep it as concise as possible. I talk about the factory, obviously do a bit of urban exploration and show you around the inside of the factory, tell the story of how we got in there and everything else, some of the stuff that we found in there. I explore and tear down this industrial PC that we found in there, attached to one of the machines, and talk about getting it loaded up with Doom. And the video, basically the kind of the grand, unveil at the end is me actually playing Doom on an industrial cake machine. It's not just clickbait. The video does actually deliver on that. One of my favourite videos I have ever made, and that's why I'm making quite a big thing about it, and why I've been shouting about it on social media for the past few weeks. So I hope you enjoy it. Of course, that will also be linked down below as well. And hopefully doing my bit for the running Doom on weird devices community that I like to give a bit of a shout out to every single week. But that's all I have for you for this week's Ramble. So thank you ever so much for joining me. I've already talked about what platforms this goes out on, and indeed the release dates and times, so I don't need to go over that again. But one thing I do need to do is to say a big thank you to my Discord community. They've been a little bit quiet this week, I will say. I had to actually go out and find a load of stories on my own, which is very unfair. No, it's always very much appreciated. And of course, they've all been a very active part of the conversation. And they're a wonderful bunch of people they are. So Gravitone, Sozzled, Dr. Evil, Steve's Tech Shed, and Naoki, of course, have all submitted stuff that I have used for stories, or indeed inspiration for stories this week. So thank you to all of you. And if you want to join in with the conversation, there's always a link down below so you can join the Discord community. And you will be more than welcome. Great bunch of people over there, as mentioned. But that's all I have for you for this week's Ramble. It is rather chilly here in the studio. I didn't do the weather forecast, did I? I'm going to have to go back and re-record this entire thing. No, you know what? We'll do it now. The weather is very uneventful. But it is quite cold. So I'm going to hit stop now. I'm going to turn my fan heater back on so I can warm back up. As you can see, I'm holding my cup of tea desperately for warmth here. Thanks for joining me once more. Please do go check out that main channel video and indeed all the other stuff. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, everyone. And I shall see you same time and place next week for another instalment of Reese Rambles. Bye.